What does it take to build the teams that literally build our future? Hello and welcome to the Boostara Podcast. I am your host, James. On the Boostara Podcast, we speak to leaders in business and uncover the truths and insight from their amazing experiences. At Boostara, we help businesses boost growth, cut costs, and get better business insights. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you, type the word growth into the comments below, and I will be sure to reach out. Today, I'm very excited because I believe we're at opposite ends of the world.
A new location for you, James, yeah?
Yeah. I'm joined by Damien McFaul, Managing Director of Blayde Recruitment. Welcome, Damien.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on.
Well, very excited to have you on, and I can see some pictures, or it might be reflections of pictures in the background that give away where you are. But could you just tell us, where are you calling us from today?
So I'm just on the outskirts of Cape Town, on the west coast of the South Atlantic Ocean, a place called Blayde, which is about 30 minutes outside Cape Town Central.
Sounds beautiful, and I guess the big question that you can really lead us into is why, right? But for those of our listeners that are not familiar with yourself, I don't know about Blayde Recruitment, could you give us just a bit of an introduction as to your journey in founding Blayde Recruitment, and what do Blayde do exactly?
Yeah, so Blayde's actual origins, it started as a pure security company that was founded by my uncle, Colin Williams, about 30 years ago. And my brother is also a partner in that business as well. That's been working in the security industry in the UK for the last 30 or so years, very established. And when I became available from the last role that I was doing I was working for a healthcare recruiter for the last 6 years as a director. My brother sort of spoke to me about coming on board and starting a recruitment arm of it. And we looked at various industries and kind of settled on construction. A lot of our family are from the construction industry, so it seemed like the kind of next way to go. And looking at the different kind of the different sectors and I've operated in the healthcare sector, the IT sector, finance. I've covered a number of sectors in my last 27 years in recruitment. So time to do something new and bring a bit of a breath of fresh air to the construction recruitment game.
Amazing. And where does the South Africa connection come in?
So I'm based between South Africa and London. So we have delivery teams in Cape Town that do all of our delivery for us. So they do all the resourcing aspect of it. We do it from here because in my last role, the last business I was working for, I've spent the last 2 years out here, and I successfully kind of transitioned a lot of the operations out to Cape Town. So it was kind of, and I've made a bit of a life for myself here. So, I tend to do sort of 4 to 5 weeks here and then go back for a week, get round, see some clients. So I'm kind of, and it's great because the time difference is only an hour. I think it'll be 2 hours after when the clocks go back in the UK in 2 weeks' time. So it's just a different kind of lifestyle for me. But I kind of enjoy coming out, but living here, but commuting to and from the UK.
Yeah, amazing. I totally relate to what you're saying about the time difference, because I used to go back and forth between Shanghai and the UK, and it was a nightmare. 7-8 hours time difference. It takes a long time to readjust, right? But when you
that's great. I can jump on a plane tonight and sleep overnight and wake up in the UK and go and see clients if I need to tomorrow. So it's kind of that flexible.
And in terms of recruitment, so we've had a lot of different niches join on the podcast recently. Where does construction lie in kinds of difficulty status of being able to hire specifically in a volume? Is there specific challenges that construction recruitment?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the business is kind of split into two parts, right? If you like. So you've got the more white collar, which is more your quantity surveyors, estimators, site managers, that kind of higher level kind of role, and then you've got the trades and labour stuff, right? Which again, that's kind of split into two again, really, with the trade stuff being carpenters, brickies, plumbers, roofers, etc., and then you've got the pure labour, right? And they've all got their different challenges because construction is, I'm mainly concentrating on the house building aspect, and we all know that the government has got massive kind of targets hit in terms of new houses. So, and we tend to work with the main contractors where that's concerned. It's not as candidate driven as it probably once was. But good labour is really hard to find. We do find that sometimes you have to fill the same job over and over again when it's a temporary role, just because you know it's that agile workforce that the client needs, right?
Yeah, yeah, and well, I guess the clients. How reliant are they on your services? I see this like near my home, houses going up, and they make it very clear on the the house availability pricing boards
Mm.
they put up. Bricklayers
Yeah,
needed
yeah,
immediately, right? So they obviously
yeah.
have their own internal drive to find local staff. Is it just a case of them using all resources that they can?
Absolutely. The temporary workforce for them on certain builds is really, really important because, say if a build, if you look at it from a pure, when it's a greenfield site to when the building starts, there can be a big gap between them. The ability to be able to bring guys in for a certain amount of time, then let them go, and then bring them back in at when there's peaks and troughs throughout that build. And of course, the Great British weather, you can't build at certain times, right? So that agile workforce for them is really important.
How have obviously you've been in your sort of present form with construction recruitment only a short while, but how have you seen
Yes.
the the trends change over time? Do you think those are it's the same across all kind of recruitment sectors, the changing trends and needs of companies?
Absolutely. I mean, I've been in the public sector really since about until earlier this year for the last since 2003. So predominantly been working within the healthcare arena. So very much concentrating on nurses, and that is a very that market has changed. To levels that I've never seen before. When the demand has been so high for specifically for nursing for so long, and in the last 2 years that has definitely dropped off, and that's through a definite government initiative to reduce agency spend. Are they actually reducing it? I've got my own opinions on that. I believe that certain things that they're doing, they're increasing their bank spend, which sometimes kind of, gazumps the spending that they're doing on agencies. So it's just in a different way. It's, but I've been in the recruitment game for so long that it's very, very, up and down. I've seen, there's been, ever since I've been in it, there's been, the death of temporary recruit, is going to stop. It never has, and it never will. It's just certain industries will have peaks and troughs, right?
I mean, without wanting to sort of get like too political, into it,
Absolutely.
government legislation and that kind of aspect, that side of things, does that really impact? When that impacts an industry, that's obviously having the knock-on effect on recruitment, right? I guess the same could be
Yeah,
true with construction, with house building projects, whether they get the go-ahead
absolutely.
or they don't.
When I first started in recruitment, back in '98, it was just about paying people via limited companies. That's how straightforward it was. You sent them a gross amount and they paid themselves. The government is government throughout the years in different guises has tried to close that down because the avoidance of paying tax. Right? They IR35, which is the legislation attached to that, has gone through various guises. This trust planning to get rid of it during a short tenure. So paying candidates has just evolved at different times. That's why we've got umbrella companies on PAYE, but the limited company direct stuff has kind of come to an end because it just can't be done anymore, unfortunately. But that was the easiest way of us paying people because we just paid them gross. But there's so much legislation attached to it now and compliance that it's as a small business, you've just got to be very, very careful about how you pay your workers.
Yeah, for sure, right. But I mean, kind of jumping into you guys specifically, what makes you different in your services? Why should a construction company, builder, whatever the project might be, why should they engage with you guys on their recruitment aspect?
Yeah, I mean that's always the kind of the $64 million question, right? Is what is the difference between me and I always used to say it in my last role when I was training all of our kind of young people coming through is if you were to throw a mile wide net across London Bridge, which is where our office was based, there was probably 20 nursing recruiters. We all did the same thing, but what's the difference? The difference is the people that you're dealing with, right? That's it. So your people are the most important thing because you pretty much all offer the same service. You're tapping into the same talent pool each and every time. So it's about relationships. I think now more than ever, when I first started in recruitment, it was about 100 calls a day. We used to share one PC that had email on between 10 of us, and we had these big machines sat on our desk with a separate client and candidate database. And I think that kind of old school phone kind of jockeying role that I was brought up on seemed to become a bit of a dying art. But I think since COVID, we've been, since we can't go out and see people as much because of COVID, that's what happened. People are more reluctant to see you now unless you've got something good, decent to offer them, or you just show, which is what I often do. I'll just show up on site, and try and speak to the site manager if possible. I think there's been a shift back towards getting on the phone and trying to build relationships because, I think I was speaking to another recruiter fairly often. He was saying he was sending emails out, he was sending out LinkedIn messages, was getting very little back. And I think people are just ignoring messages and LinkedIn messages. I find if I connect with 20 people and send 20 messages on LinkedIn to try and offer them construction recruitment, they're probably getting numerous others from other people. It's about using tools that we've got available now to call these people again, because people are, when I started in IT recruitment, for example, most people were sat at a PC. If you phone their direct line number at work, they'd probably have answered. Now people not necessarily haven't got direct line numbers anymore, right? So trying to get their mobile numbers and using certain software that's available to us all now, you can get that information. I think there's a shift back towards that old school business development and getting on the phone and trying to introduce yourself and trying to build rapport with people that way, and then getting out and seeing people as much as possible again. I think is to build that relationship. It's as important as it ever has been.
Do you think that's partly due to kind of contact overload? People are just, we're so well connected now that we're almost too connected, and people are just tired of being messaged and emailed.
I know myself. How many LinkedIn messages do I get per day? Loads. I try and be as connected with people as I possibly can, but if I'm getting 40, 50 messages a week about a service that I've just got no use for, you could spend your whole life just replying to people's messages that you've got no interest in. So it's making yourself different from everybody else, right?
Exactly right. It's interesting you said there about going on site, going to construction sites to speak to the manager. I guess in different sectors. It's just like for your candidates, right? You've got to go to the right places where your candidates are to
Yeah,
to let them know about you and to get the applications and to find them jobs, right? You've got to go where they are. Is that you're finding with construction that is the most effective way? I mean, is that how you've picked up
absolutely.
your clients so far? Just
Yeah,
go
and
on
that
site.
and that takes a certain person to be able to do that, right? Because it's door knocking, right? And that's quite a scary concept generally for most people.
Yeah,
So you've got to have that courage to be able to go and knock on the door and be told no, right? Or people are not available, or whatever it is. It takes some courage.
yeah,
And
yeah.
people are, very much in trying to get so you talked about building successful teams, trying to get, new recruits to do that kind of thing is tough, because majority of people are hiding or using their mobile phone, using WhatsApp to connect to people. I'm sure for a period that was probably quite successful, but not now. It's that whole thing. I don't need to talk to that person, so I'm just going to ignore them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It goes back. I mean, we'll jump into AI in a short
Mm.
while, but it goes back to that whole point of human connection, and
Yeah,
it's just being able to talk to people, right? And it's a skill, if you like, in itself, but it's the most highest leverage skill that we can have in an increasingly technological world, is just simply being able to speak to people, get your point across, understand communication in, I think, a world where a lot of young people now coming out of school, those sort of COVID babies, those COVID children, are maybe lacking a little bit in that side because they've just been on the phones the whole time.
I have two of them. My daughters are 18 and 20, and they do know that a phone is actually original purpose is to speak to people on. They just think it's a messaging tool, right? And I think, never has it been so much easier to talk to people than it has been now, but we speak to people so much less
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
we're using messages, we're using email, probably emails less, but WhatsApp. I don't even think my kids like using WhatsApp. They use Snapchat to, I mean, that's just that's lost on me. I wouldn't even know how to go about doing that. So,
yeah.
you know, it helps in certain ways with them, because they can introduce me to new things. Because my eldest daughter is doing some social media stuff for us, which is great. But
Mm,
yeah, I just wouldn't even know where to start with
yeah,
Snapchat. I mean, I don't know what it is.
yeah, yeah. I don't
Now you
even.
know
So,
now, right?
but as interesting coming at it, from both sides. As you put your sort of business leader, hat on. What does that mean for you then? In terms of being able to grow the business, so to reach more clients, to develop those relationships with more clients, and equally, I suppose the candidates side, because I suppose both are very different areas that you have to concentrate and you have to build on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, with the world being so much smaller these days than what it ever has been, being able to do things like offshoring, using companies abroad to do your delivery or to do certain aspects of what you need to be done. We all know that, insurance companies offshore to, various locations in the world. You can build workforce is more agile, it's more efficient, it's more cost effective to be able to build teams in other locations than necessarily it is in the UK.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Right. Yeah, because I'm interested, sort of the the misconceptions that maybe a lot of companies might have, when they first engage with you, because I've had this message quite a lot from different recruitment companies, and just being seen as expensive, money grabbing kind of agencies, and you touched upon it before there, in your example in London of there being 20 of you in the same area that all do the same thing. So obviously differentiating yourself and building those relationships with clients is first and foremost. But how do you get over those sort of common misconceptions that clients might have about you, especially when you reach out to them for the first time or you approach them for the first time?
Yeah, I mean that's never changed, right? Is we used to have this intro that we used to do years and years ago. I'm calling from one of the dreaded agencies, right? It's just, that used to be because you'd kind of get over that initial pushback straight away. But yeah, it hasn't changed. Some people think that, so I think the good clients are the ones that appreciate what you do and what you bring to the table in terms of that, in terms of their workforce. And you've got to be seen to be adding value in some kind of way. And that's, it's important to, one of the most important things in recruitment game is making sure people get paid on time. The candidates are well looked after, the clients are getting a good service. And I think you've got to, we talk about in our game a lot about honesty. I think one of the biggest things is people not turning up for interviews, being ghosted. And that's from a client or a candidate's perspective. Clients disappear on us, candidates disappear on us. So being that in between to go out and do that and take away the pain. Obviously I started in a world when there was no really talent acquisition teams anymore, but still we're not just stick a job onto job servers we used to get a candidate and fill a job in 5 minutes. There's so much more goes into it than what it ever has, and building that network of within your particular vertical market is really important.
That trust and showing the value to begin
yes,
with.
Trust, showing the value.
They have a need for you, right? They need your services, but the hesitancy is going to be, especially if they've been burnt before by previous agencies, they've had those sort of bad experiences. Those can be the things that stop them moving forward or make them a bit more hesitant. But you demonstrating that trust and having the case studies of other clients you've worked with that, this is the success that they've gone through. You can feel, rest assured. But let's take our time to develop this, I suppose.
Yeah, and especially in my game, especially within the trades and labour sector, you're going to get unreliability.
Yeah,
and that's just unfortunately part of the game that we're involved in. Is people aren't going to turn up for work. There's going to be situations where sickness could be quite high for a particular person, but by having us there, they're able to churn those staff, and we've got that constant kind of churn of staff coming in as well as going out, right?
Yeah. I'm interested. AI. How's that changing the game as you've seen it? As someone that's sort of been here, kind of pre sort of heavy tech era to the kind of landscape that we're living in now.
Yeah, I think tech has always been a very important part of our role as a recruiter anyway, in terms of being able to deliver to a client in a timely way, right? You need decent systems to be able to do that, as well as automating that. That payroll process, automating that is really important. So from timesheet coming in to paying somebody very quickly, that part's important. The important part of finding a candidate, finding their CV, and then getting them through the compliance process, whether that be, certainly in my previous role, healthcare, which is very, very compliance heavy, because as an NHS framework supplier, you've got certain things you have to adhere to, and nobody wants to send a nurse to a hospital that hasn't had all the correct checks, right? That's and the referencing and all that kind of stuff. So that's where I think having things automated becomes very, very powerful, because it's about getting that process as slick as possible and as quick as possible, because from the minute you find that candidate, the longer it takes you to get them through compliance, it's proven that the less likely they are to go out to work, right? So if that process takes too long, they lose engagement, right? And if you think about the cost of finding somebody through to getting them compliant, then what's the cost of that? And then how many weeks do they have to work until you actually start to make a bit of a profit out of them? It can take some time. So, that's where I see AI on the candidate side being very, very powerful, because, that's what we're all in a race, with various competitors, we're all in a race to try and get candidates compliant as quickly as possible so we can get them out to work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all a game of speed, isn't it? The candidate wants to get to work as
Absolutely,
quickly as possible. The
absolutely. And
client
humans
wants
can only
a
work at a certain
predictability of
pace,
work.
right?
Say again?
Humans can only work at a certain pace.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And if we've got the technology that can advance that, can quicken up the process, then everyone wins really, as long as I suppose it's done accurately and
Yeah.
efficiently, right? That I think that's a message. We had another recruitment agency on Jared from Newvine, and his prediction. Wonder if you agree with this. Is as the technology evolves, we'll see a shrinking of the recruitment space because there'll be those recruitment agencies that take on AI, that take on those efficiency gains, those speed gains. That will just eat up the business from those recruitment agencies that don't and are operating too slow and that have basically less of a market share. I mean, would you kind of agree with that?
I think I do to a certain extent, but I think where the relationships come in as well. That I've still got relationships with certain clients where I can phone them up and they will give me a job that perhaps nobody else has got access to, or it's just built on that relationship. And I think that's from a client perspective. I see AI being more powerful within the candidate market as opposed to the client side, because the client is very much about clients king. Business development is not something I feel, is about building relationships, and you can't do that other than face to face.
Yeah, 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 exactly. I'm curious, for yourself, how have you used AI, in your own sort of day-to-day operations?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is centered around candidate management. Um, we've got a lot of stuff set up to keep in contact with candidates, so it's firing out messages to them constantly. Maybe from the point that they go onto our CRM, we use it from that point of view to send out messages at certain times that it just automates it all. Right? I can't, as a very small business at this stage, I can't do everything on my own. Right, so I need the help of systems to be able to do that for me.
Yeah, so you can focus on the client relationship building.
Absolutely, and yeah, I use a company that do if I have a particular job that comes in, I use a company that do all my smart searching for me already. So then they can bring me the targeted candidates rather than me having to do it myself. So and they've got their own AI tool that does that for them. So I can, within the space of 10 minutes, I can have half a dozen CVs for a particular job. Whereas if I did that myself and jumped onto one of the job boards or something like that, that's quite time consuming. Whereas I use a company that specifically goes to all of the job boards and scrapes off half a dozen candidates for me. And then I
Takes
do
away
the,
all that
yeah,
manual
take
data entry, that manual
all that
search,
manual data entry
yeah,
is gone.
which is all
Yeah.
time. Yeah,
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 and they
yeah,
and they literally pop it. They literally send it to my CRM and it populates it automatically.
yeah, yeah.
Which in
That's
the old days we used to have a team of, my first recruitment job, we'd have half a dozen people whose job it was to literally put CVs onto the database.
yeah. It's the equivalent of like a shorthand typist, right? Just
Yeah,
tap
like
tap tap.
we call them DBAs, right? But database administrators. But they were data input people.
Wow.
Yeah, literally now I ping it to an email address and it automatically populates it all, which is
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
And
Well,
then
no, I was going to say I'll ask you this question because I asked quite a few people the same thing to think a little bit deeper. Is there a part of your operations, your day-to-day kind of working operations at the moment that if you could bring some sort of technology, some sort of AI, automation, technology, whatever it might be, to just take that off your plate, like that's done. You don't have to do that anymore. What would have what would it be? What would have the biggest impact on the business and in recruitment in general? Do you think?
um, I mean, something that you would kind of guaranteed a better return on in terms of business development would be great. I don't know if that exists or not, in my limited knowledge, but I think that would be the most powerful thing if all of a sudden you could bring new clients on board, um, without the need for that kind of constant, phoning around, speaking to clients, trying to build relationships. And obviously there are things that automated messages go out to clients, but it's not proven, right? You have to write things in a certain way to be able to be picked up correctly. It's not an easy question to answer, that one.
Yeah, and it really, I think it really differs according to the company, according
Yeah,
to the industry. I talk about this quite often. And there's over 40,000 tools out there, AI tools in existence, and I think a lot of people see on LinkedIn there's reams of posts and workshops and different things happening, right? And a lot of people think, oh, I've got to take this and then try to ram it into my business and make it work. But that's the kind of the wrong way around, isn't it? It's more your business is in a very unique position, a very unique situation, and what will work for it specifically for whatever bottleneck or problem is going to be a very, very specific solution, right? It can use the tools there, but they've got to be selected in a certain way and used in a particular strategic way as well, because it's not just it's like the carpenter, right, making the chairs and the tables, blaming the quality of it on his tools. Often it's not the tools, it's the person wielding it, right? Did they have the right skill, did they have the right knowledge to use those tools? And I think that's the world we live in at the moment. Is just information overload. There's just so much out there, but knowing what should work for you is very difficult.
absolutely. And I think that's what's been so good about doing this start. It's still quite, we're still in the startup phase, right? Is being able to build that CRM that the information that's going into it is clean, so that it increases our delivery capability. That's the most important thing. Not having loads of useless kind of candidate records on our system. Having building a really powerful client database on there as well, that we can extract the information at the time that we need to, rather than just so you can keep in contact with clients all the time as well, rather than just you go on and you forget about it, right? So being able to build that from scratch has been something that I've really enjoyed doing, because it's been a while. I say every time I do a startup, it's going to be the last one that I do, but here I am doing one again at 50 years old. It's something that I really enjoy, is building stuff from scratch, and doing this on my own for the first time. Last time I did it on my own, which was with a business partner, was 20 something years ago, right? And the world's very different now to what it was in 2003. I did a couple of startups in my last role, but it had serious financial backing and lots of resource, and that back office to be able to do everything, right? So this time it's me, my brother, doing some back office stuff, and just getting back on the phones and speaking to clients again, which I probably missed a little bit.
Yeah,
Not
but it's
probably, I did.
obviously you're good at it and you enjoy it, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be drawn back to.
Yeah, I do enjoy it, and I think you lose. As you move up the kind of corporate ladder, you kind of become more. Even though I always tried to stay on that side of things, you do become more and more removed from it, right? And you end up getting paid for making decisions rather than actually doing this. Recruitment's a tough job. People forget that. People see these smiley, happy people that are putting on this pretense all the time, but what they don't know is that 10 times before that they've made 40 calls and spoken to nobody. It can get quite demoralizing, right?
Yeah, and it takes a certain amount of resolve, will, toughness, persistence to overcome
Absolutely.
that. Yeah,
It's,
yeah. I
it's
mean,
it's not so it's not a job that anybody grows up with saying that they want to be a recruitment consultant when they're older, and it's not a job that I'd want my daughters to do either. That's for sure.
yeah,
I'd like
yeah.
them to do something that's a bit more creative and a bit more entrepreneurial, maybe. But
Well, I mean, going back to that original, question I stated at the beginning, what does it take to build a team that builds our future? What would you say? What does it take to, to really help, a construction company fill their roles, and to build a recruitment company as you are? What does it take?
I think, having started a business, like I said, back in 2003, looking back at that and that journey of 15, 16 years, the mistakes that we made, we're all centered around talent, right? All centered around hires that we made. We tried to do it all. If I was to do it again, and I am doing it again, is once budget allows to, is bringing in expertise. I think that's really important. We always did it. We always did it by bringing on rookies and training them up. And now I see some of these people that I trained 20 years ago are in director positions in some big companies, which is great to see, right? But building successful teams now is about having that right mix. You need that youth and enthusiasm, and that those go-getters who have just come out of university or just come out of school that are gonna who've got the bit between their teeth and they can go after stuff. But I think you need that experience. That experience element is really important as well, and getting that mix right. And I look back to my last role, and I had this amazing team in London that was just the most diverse team that I've ever worked with. But great, you had the people that would pick people up when they were down. And we navigated, in my last role, we navigated a lot. I joined there in July 2019, and then COVID hit, and there was just so much went on within that business. But it was a great company, really great business to work with, and we built the most amazing teams there. That was great fun to work with. We were a real close unit, and I think that was really important as well. We all had each other's backs. We created an environment that everybody could be the best version of themselves, and I think that was what was really key to us making a success of that business for in the time that I was there.
Yeah. You remind me very vividly of my own time, my previous role. The emphasis we put on staff first, customer second. I know that's a little bit sort of controversial, but I really kind of agreed with it. It was care and develop and push your own staff, your own internal community. When you take the care, you take the time to build professionally everyone within your team. That's gonna spill over onto the customers that we're all dealing with, right? If you can create that kind of community, that also creates a bond, a team, a business that will stay strong no matter what hits it, right? And for sure, things will hit it if you want your business to survive over 10, 15, 20, 30 years. But the looser that is, the less community culture there is, the more likely the whole business is just going to crumble and fail the moment something challenging arises.
Yeah, I think what we had there was we had this healthy internal competition between the teams that was healthy. Probably went a bit too far sometimes, if I'm being honest. And that obviously sometimes had, as one of the senior leaders, that was I was a referee in some of that sometimes. So sometimes I was the instigator of it to try and get a little bit of passion. But we certainly had that. We had passion. We had everybody wanted to do well. That was that internal competition that made everybody, that gave that extra 1%, 5%, 10% from everybody. But at the end of the day, we were all in it together, which was until I came out to Cape Town, I was really proud of that sort of 3 or 4 years, nearly 5 years, probably the best time in my 27 years in this game. It was a good experience.
What would you say then, going forward for Blayde Recruitment? What's the goal going
Absolutely.
forward?
I want to build that right mix of what we've got offshore and onshore. My brother's doing some of the business development in the UK. We just hired somebody in the UK to do some BD as well, who's young, dynamic, bringing loads to the table. He's out seeing clients already. I'm over here. I'm coming back in a couple of weeks to go out and see some clients myself as well. I think we've got to strike that balance of good people across the board. That experience element, and some good people offshore to do the delivery, because on top of everything else, recruitment companies, and in some ways we don't need that big shiny office anymore, right? if you're brave enough to, and it's something that I pushed back on for a long time in my last role about people working from home. I'm probably all for it now, but with so much pressure on margins and businesses becoming increasingly more expensive to run because you need all of these tools, you need a decent CRM, you need a decent infrastructure. Maybe you don't need the shiny office. Salaries are higher in the UK, on costs are higher than they have ever been. Everything is more expensive, so you've got to strike that right balance to be, and plus obviously clients have got, they're trying to, push margins down as much as possible, right? So it's striking that balance between everything that's really important.
Yeah, it's a difficult balancing act to play.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Who would you say then is your ideal client if they're listening? who is someone ideally you'd like to work with?
I had this conversation with a client the other day, right? And I said to him, "You are my ideal client, and the reason why you're my ideal client is because you pass the trust on to me to do a good job for you. The worst part of our game is we provide a free service up unless you're doing retained recruitment, different ball game altogether. But if you're just doing bog standard contingency recruitment, until somebody starts work, we're working for nothing, right? So an ideal client for me is a client that trusts I know what I'm talking about. That if I find a candidate for a site manager role, that process of them giving feedback is not going to be very long. It's a question of, right, I've got a candidate, they've got X, Y, and Z experience. When are you free to interview them? That's the stage that you want to get to with every client. And we've got a couple of clients like that already that just trust us to do the process.
I really concur with everything you're saying. Based on trust, right? That's trust has got to be there, number one. And I think anyone listening, they fall into a category of a construction company listening, they'll feel straight away that you are someone trustworthy. You are someone that they can ensure will uphold their side of the deal, right, and will do a good job, go far and beyond. I don't totally commend anyone to really reach out to Damien. And when I say reach out, what's the best contact details to get you on, Damien?
Yeah, I mean, I'm either on my mobile, on my email all the time, Damien at Blayde, BLAYDE.co.uk. Either of those methods. I'm here and working every single day. Probably harder than ever, right?
Yeah. Well, when you're not on the plane going backwards and forwards.
When I'm not on the plane, although that's getting easier, right? Because now I sit on answering emails and all the rest of it. Because British Airways planes are very good. Virgin ones are very good, but Norse Airways don't have Wi-Fi yet, so I try and avoid Norse. But they're also the cheapest, right? So Wi-Fi is important on the aeroplane now, especially if there's a daytime flight.
Can't escape work. Has to follow you everywhere.
It used to be you jump on a plane and it's like, right, watch 4 films and avoid all communication with everybody. But now it's like, even when my daughter was over here recently, my youngest daughter, she's got access to my credit card. And I'm like, oh, you got full internet access. She's like, yeah, well, what am I going to do for 12 hours? Okay. Watch a film? I don't want to talk to my friends. Okay.
Maybe makes the journey go quicker, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah,
exactly. Well, amazing insights today, Damien. I mean, I think the biggest insight, and it's not something comprehensively new, but it just makes total sense the way that you're explaining it, and especially within your particular niche, is just the value of human connection, speaking to people in person, in a world where we're just overwhelmed with messages, email, LinkedIn direct messages. The best way to cut through that is actually just go and speak to people and develop, like you said there, that trust in recruitment and in the the game that you're in, as you've seen over the years, is number one. Without trust, you can't build a relationship with a client. You can't build a company.
Definitely, totally agree.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining
Thanks,
today,
James.
Jamie. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on.
You too. Thanks, James.
Brilliant. And thank you everyone for listening. Please like and share this video so we can get this message out to as many people as possible. Thank you very much.